So we're hearing a lot of conversation about consumers, and our next two panelists are really our experts on that. So let me introduce to you our treasurer, Joseph Sandler. Joe is a member of Sandler, Reiff, Lamb, Rosenstein, and Birkenstock law firm in Washington, D.C., and his areas of expertise include, fortunately for our benefit, nonprofit organizations, government ethics, and regulation of lobbying, campaign finance, election law, corporate and tax issues affecting political and advocacy activities. Joe has been named one of the best lawyers in D.C. for over 10 years. I think that's becoming a smaller and smaller number in Washington, D.C. I am honored that he is a participant and a board member in our process. And I just want to take a minute, Joe, and say, you know, we have made this commitment to engaging consumer groups and subsequently the groups that the individuals they represent. So, you know, we're looking somewhere right now around 4 million consumers that are already engaged in this conversation as we initiate it today. What is your impression, your expertise in organic being what it is, that will happen as we move forward with the definition of organic, and will we start to see any kind of organized concerns around what's natural and what's organic, primarily as it relates to food?
Yes, I think that, and Todd's point was well taken, that what's natural for outside the food area for supplements and other products, personal care, is a different issue when it comes to food. I think generally consumer advocates are excited about and welcome the opportunity that this association presents to work with industry to tackle some of these very difficult problems. It's a unique partnership between industry and consumer groups in this arena. Outside the area of food, for non-food, non-fiber products, including supplements, pet food, personal care, cosmetics, I think you'll find, Karen, that consumer advocates will be fully supportive of developing and certifying to an industry standard that about what natural is that consumers can rely on to give some real meaning to that term, and that'll be a great service not only to industry but to consumers. When it comes to use of the term natural in labeling food products, the concern is that if a standard becomes established, the consumers will begin to confuse the term with organic, which is our certified organic, which is the gold standard that for all of its issues and shortcomings, that consumers know what it means and what they can count on. And the concern is that manufacturers will be tempted to continue to use the term natural instead of seeking organic certification. That being said, we think that the association can play a very useful role in establishing minimum standards for the term natural that will avoid legal liability and at least give some floor, some assurance to consumers in the food area without creating the confusion with organic or undermining the movement towards increasing use of organic certification. We also hope that the association will work towards improving organic standards.
Well, let's talk about that a little. So we know that organic is the gold standard. The association's principles are rooted in supporting and promoting organic practices. And yet, my question would be, is there room for improvement in organic, or is natural a vehicle for actually redefining another way of looking at food? And when I say that, I look to issues like soil conservation, naturally fed and raised animals, beef, pork, issues around dairy and eggs. I mean, do you see a future in evolution around organic and or natural, and is that being fed somewhat by this perception that natural to consumers who aren't as savvy as some of our organic activists would be, but natural is essentially the same as organic, only less expensive because they haven't gone through the standards?
Well, that's the problem. We don't want consumers ever to think that the lesser, some lesser standard for natural is equivalent to organic, and that the priority in that regard, as you indicate, should be to improve organic standards, particularly in regard to meat, eggs, and dairy products. There's been some movement, obviously, by USDA already in this area to ensure that healthier, more humane, climate-friendly practices become the norm for organic. But again, the concern is that in achieving these important goals through definition of natural, that not undermine the maintenance and improvement of standards for organic certification.
So how do you envision other parts of commerce grappling with this terminology of organic? Is it actually going to be easier to do natural in some, like let's say, I know textiles is a new issue for the organic piece. I mean, how is this playing out in the other sectors that we're talking about representing, including things like pet food, dietary supplements?
Right. Well, outside the food area, where there's some ability to have, or there is an ability to have personal care products voluntarily certified, USDA has not really made the certification mandatory for use of the term organic. Outside of that area, for non-food, non-fiber products, the idea of developing a standard for what natural means is one, I say that the consumer advocates, I think, can fully get behind as a means of avoiding the misleading and confusion of consumers about what's in those products.
One of our objectives today is to really engage in a fairly truthful and honest conversation about many of the challenges that we know we face, and you've heard from two of our board members today. I was just curious to know if either one of you, since you were there at the beginning of the development of the association, had anything you wanted to offer in terms of the dichotomy around some of these issues and how organic consumers are at the table with lawyers and corporations, and in recognition of the fact that indeed there are these sort of polarizing viewpoints that we'll be grappling with, whatever, and that how we'll sort of manage that conversation around these issues.
I think that, from my perspective, is that when you finally get two sides to the table in discussing, not everybody's going to end up being happy, which will generally mean that you'll come to a good standard. It's important to engage in that conversation because ultimately, as I said earlier, if the consumers are not buying into it, it's not going to help you or going to save you if a consumer class action attorney comes around and sues you, because they're going to argue, well, that's not what consumers think. And they're going to have consumer surveys that say that's not what consumers think. And so it's important to get consumer groups on board, because without getting consumer groups on board, you're going to have a standard that everybody's going to reject. It doesn't help you to have officials of the government mandating down from a trade association what that definition should be without engaging consumers. Consumers need to be engaged. Otherwise, the lawsuits will not go away, and you will continue to be in the mess. And by getting people to the table, I think what you get is you get people discussing the issues, discussing what's important to each other, sustainability, just agricultural practices in general, what people really want. And that way, companies can actually respond to consumers' needs more better. They just are able to respond and put out products that consumers really, truly want, and they understand what they're buying. It's transparency. I'll be honest, I have no issue with GMOs. But something, transparency is important. And if you have a GMO product, be honest about it. If you think it's good, you should tell people why you think it's good. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But explain why it's good. And that's all you're asking for, is just transparency, and consumers will make their decisions.
I agree with Todd. I think that I don't know of any other association in this arena that actually brings consumers and industry together to try to address and tackle these issues, and that's the really exciting opportunity we think this represents.
See, this is why I have the most exciting job in the city of Washington, D.C.